Every day, the global economy moves trillions of dollars in goods and raw materials across a complex web of supply chains. The whole system is designed for maximum efficiency, but it has a weak spot, a single point of failure so critical that shutting it down could throw the entire world into an economic tailspin. It's not a stock market or a bank. It's a narrow strip of water, just 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. The waterway lies between Iran and Oman, and its use is governed by international law. But Iran's position gives it the ability to threaten everything that passes through. While its use is governed by international law, Iran's position gives it the ability to threaten everything that passes through. This is the Strait of Hormuz. Some have called it the jugular vein of the global economy, and for good reason. This is the Strait of Hormuz. Some have called it the jugular vein of the global economy, and for good reason. In 2024, an average of 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products passed through this choke point every single day. That's about 20% of the world's daily petroleum consumption, all forced through a tiny maritime corridor. On one side, you have some of the world's largest oil and gas producers. On the other, the entire global market. And standing guard is a nation with the geographic position and military capability to choke off this vital flow. So the question isn't just if it could happen. The real question is, what happens to all of us on the day it's tried? The consequences would be catastrophic, with the potential to trigger an economic meltdown that would reach every corner of the globe. This is the story of how one waterway holds the power to destabilize the world economy. To really get the danger, you have to start with the geography. The Strait of Hormuz is the only sea passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. For major oil-producing nations like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Iraq, this strait is the main artery for their energy exports. It is the lifeblood of their economies. Qatar, one of the world's top exporters of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, is almost entirely dependent on this route for its exports. In 2025, about 1/5 of all global LNG trade squeezed through this passage. On any given day, a parade of the world's largest supertankers navigates through shipping lanes that are, in practice, only a couple of miles wide in each direction. This isn't just a number, it's the physical lifeblood of our industrial world. The oil that becomes gasoline for our cars, fuel for our planes, and the plastics in our homes and hospitals, a huge portion of it starts its journey right here. But it's not just about oil and gas. The strait is a critical route for all sorts of other goods like fertilizers and their chemical precursors produced in the Gulf. A disruption here isn't just an energy crisis. It can quickly become a food security crisis as the cost of producing and transporting food skyrockets. While the United States has cut its direct reliance on Hormuz oil, the rest of the world has not. In 2024, U.S. crude oil imports through the strait accounted for only about 7% of total imports. But Asia, in particular, remains profoundly dependent. In recent years, over 80% of the crude oil transiting the strait was headed for Asian markets, powering the economies of China, Japan, India, and South Korea. A threat to Hormuz is a direct threat to their economic survival. In recent years, over 80% of the crude oil transiting the strait was headed for Asian markets, powering the economies of China, Japan, India, and South Korea. A threat to Hormuz is a direct threat to their economic survival. For decades, the global economy has made a bet that this single, narrow waterway will always stay open. It's a bet that looks riskier every year. Join us in Part 2 as we examine the tactics of disruption. When people talk about closing the Strait of Hormuz, they might picture a physical blockade, like a wall of ships. The reality is more complicated. Iran doesn't need to completely and permanently close the strait to cause chaos. It just has to make passage so dangerous that shipping companies are no longer willing to risk their vessels, their cargo, and their crews. A de facto closure can be just as damaging as a formal one. Iran's military strategy is built on this idea of asymmetric warfare. It knows it can't beat the U.S. Navy in a head-to-head battle. So its goal is to make sailing through the strait an unacceptable gamble. To do this, it's believed to have a layered defense. This reportedly includes a large arsenal of anti-ship missiles along its coastline and on islands it controls in the Gulf. It's also estimated to have a fleet of hundreds of small, fast-attack boats designed to swarm and overwhelm larger ships. But its most effective tools might be the ones you can't see. Iran is assessed to have a significant stockpile of naval mines, which could be deployed quickly and secretly. There are also concerns about its capabilities in electronic warfare, like GPS spoofing, which could potentially be used to lure ships into Iranian waters to be seized. We've seen this playbook before, with Iran seizing commercial tankers in response to international sanctions. The moment a conflict escalates, the risk calculation for global shipping changes entirely. The Persian Gulf would be reclassified as a high war risk zone. Insurance is the lubricant of global trade, and without it, things can grind to a halt. In a crisis, the first shockwave would hit the global oil market. The price of crude is set on a global stage, so a disruption anywhere affects prices everywhere. Even a partial disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, taking just a fraction of those millions of daily barrels off the market, would likely trigger a panicked buying frenzy. Analyst projections suggest a major disruption at Hormuz could cause oil prices to surge dramatically, with some scenarios forecasting prices jumping from around $90 a barrel to $120, $150, or even higher, all depending on how bad the crisis is and how long it's expected to last. We've seen previews of this. During periods of high tension, oil prices have spiked by several dollars a barrel in a single day, just on the fear of a future closure. A real disruption would be orders of magnitude worse. Economic models paint a grim picture. Analyst projections suggest a major disruption at Hormuz could cause oil prices to surge dramatically, with some scenarios forecasting prices jumping from around $90 a barrel to $120, $150, or even higher, all depending on how bad the crisis is and how long it's expected to last. At the same time, a second domino would fall: shipping and insurance. The moment mines are deployed or missiles are fired, the London-based insurers who underwrite most of the world's maritime trade would face a choice: either stop offering coverage for the region or raise their war risk premiums to astronomical levels. For many ship owners, the risk could become uninsurable at any price. The choice would be simple: stop sailing to the Gulf. Vessel traffic would plummet almost overnight. The tankers that carry the world's energy would be stuck in port. The flow of oil wouldn't just slow down, it could come to a near standstill. Next, we examine the logistics chaos in Part 3. While the world's attention would be on oil prices, a quieter but equally damaging crisis would unfold in global logistics. Modern supply chains are often just-in-time systems. These systems are built on the assumption of predictable, non-stop shipping. A Hormuz crisis would shatter that assumption, causing ripples across every industry on Earth. Producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have built bypass pipelines to transport a portion of their oil overland to ports on the Red Sea or the Gulf of Oman, avoiding Hormuz. However, while their combined capacity is significant, they can't come close to replacing the massive volumes that pass through the strait. The same goes for LNG, which has virtually no pipeline bypass options. Qatari gas gets through the strait by ship, or it doesn't get to market at all. The only other option is to go the long way around, sailing around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. This detour adds thousands of nautical miles and weeks to a journey. The extra cost for a single round trip could approach $1 million. Now, multiply that across thousands of voyages. The cost of moving anything by sea would explode. Freight rates on affected lanes could jump significantly, and it's not just about cost. Taking longer routes ties up the global fleet for longer periods. Fewer ships are available for pickups, creating worldwide backlogs and vessel shortages. Ports that aren't built for this sudden influx of traffic would become congested, leading to more delays. The intricate dance of global shipping would descend into chaos. This is where the crisis jumps from financial news and shipping lanes into the real economy. The 1-2 punch of skyrocketing energy prices and paralyzed supply chains would act as a powerful stagflationary shock, stalling economic growth while driving up prices. First, inflation would ignite. Higher oil prices mean higher costs for transportation, manufacturing, and agriculture. Higher shipping costs mean everything that travels by sea gets more expensive. A report from the UN Conference on Trade and Development warns that these shocks quickly raise the cost of living, hitting developing nations the hardest. Economic growth would hit a wall. Some economic models predict a severe Hormuz disruption could slash global GDP growth, a contraction that could certainly trigger a global recession. Unemployment would likely spike as businesses facing soaring costs are forced to scale back. Industries like auto manufacturing and chemicals would face an immediate crisis. Stock markets around the world would likely tumble as investors flee risk. The very interconnectedness that makes the global economy so efficient would become its greatest vulnerability, transmitting the crisis from one sector to another with breathtaking speed. It would be a self-reinforcing cycle of collapsing demand and fractured supply, with no easy way out. The interconnectedness that makes the global economy efficient would become its greatest vulnerability. Join us for the final chapter, Part 4, where we examine the inevitable response and the world's lingering fragility. A major disruption in the Strait of Hormuz would not go unanswered. It would be seen as an act of economic warfare against the entire world, and the international response would likely be swift and led by the United States. The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain, right in the heart of the Persian Gulf, for this very reason. A military operation to reopen the strait would be a top priority. This would be a massive effort, likely involving minesweepers, naval escorts for commercial ships, and strikes to degrade Iran's ability to launch more attacks. Many believe a U.S.-led coalition would eventually succeed in reopening the waterway. But eventually is the key word. Such an operation would be complex, dangerous, and time-consuming. It could take weeks to convince commercial shipping to return. And every single day the strait remains contested, the global economic damage gets worse. Even after the conflict ends, the world would be left with a painful economic hangover and a new understanding of its own fragility. The crisis would accelerate the push for alternatives. We would likely see a new wave of investment in bypass pipelines, a renewed focus on strategic oil reserves, and a faster transition toward other energy sources. Nations would be forced to rethink their just-in-time supply chains, building more redundancy into a system that was previously optimized only for cost. The Strait of Hormuz is more than just a line on a map. It's a stark reminder that our modern, interconnected world rests on a handful of fragile foundations. Understanding these choke points is the first step to understanding the hidden risks that shape our world. The threat simmering in the Strait of Hormuz is a chronic condition for the global economy. For now, the delicate balance holds. The tankers continue their daily passage, and the world economy keeps running. But the potential for disruption is always there, a geopolitical fault line running directly beneath the world's energy supply. A crisis here would prove, in the most brutal way possible, that geography is far from irrelevant. In the 21st century, a 21-mile-wide channel of water can still put the global economy at risk. And the price of passage is a stability we can no longer take for granted. Thank you for watching this global news series.